on, Mayhem Nation? Today we are furthering our discussion on mobilizing the position restriction, giving context to some of the positions that we were. Last week we talked about, and if you haven't seen it, go back, talking about how one of the core and central tenets of our model has always been to give the tissues context. If you're missing shoulder extension, you have to work on tissues and shoulder extension, those related positions. That's why, if you want to work on your squat, it's important to work on positions in the squat. Of course, work on all of the positions related to what a hip does. So we sort of have this hierarchy of needs. Hey, I need to work on the tissues in this, but also what is the whole leg system doing? So we're furthering our conversation about chest wall. We talked about sort of being able to come into the chest and work on the chest wall and move the arm around. Today I'm going to work on a little bit different, kind of south of the pec. And in this situation, we're talking about what's going on with the lat and this muscle here called the serratus anterior. So the serratus anterior it's the boxer's muscle, but none of us box anymore. And basically, it's this muscle that attaches from the back of the scapula and wraps around and inserts onto the rib cage. And it pulls the scapula forward. So that's why it was the boxer's muscle. So scapular, protraction, reaching out requires this. And it also works as a rotator force couple to be able to put the shoulder overhead. So if I get sticky or this lat serratus interface kind of gets tacked down to the chest wall, it's potential for me to lose a lot of shoulder function. So if you ever had a shoulder issue and they had you do push-up plus exercises, that's what they were trying to do when you kind of do that hyper big push. We get plenty of that on the dips, on the rings, on the pushing that we're doing up from the ground, from the burpees. We don't have to do a lot of push-up plus-like activities. But it does behoove us to work on these things. Now, I've got a couple different rollers here. Both of these are ready state rollers. This one is super, super soft. And the reason I'm choosing a hyper soft roller today is it makes it a little bit more comfortable when I start to wrap that around my chest wall. These ribs are very superficial and very tender when you start, when you grabbed kids before and bored your fingers into their sides. The supple leopard roller, is a little bit firmer, has a little bit more texture, but what I'm asking you to do is grab something that has a little bit less firm durometer. It's a little bit softer. So your old beat up roller, make this comfortable. I want to show you what this looks like with a really soft roller. And in this position, typically you may already, because you're following the ready state, be working on your lats. So you're doing our classic figure eights. And look at the position I'm in. I'm in this front rack position. Arms are in front in this long lever shape. I can also be going over my head into this long lever overhead shape. So isn't that interesting? I said that this muscle really helps to protract the shoulder, this shape. And in this position, it helps to upwardly rotate. So we're working on the function of the muscle in these two positions. What I'm doing here is I'm not even in there yet. I'm not on that chest wall. So as I come onto my side here, I can start to push and pull and maneuver and sort of free up or interface or have some input, whatever language you want to use, mobilize, between this chest and the actual lat itself. So I can come onto the side, I can tack and move the body back and forth on it. That's keeping the roller still and then pushing and pulling. I can retract and protract the scap in multiple positions, but also I can feel free to roll my body back and forth doing those classic figure eights. And suddenly you realize, you're like, oh, that chest fascia of that pec does start to make a difference when it's in that aspect of the shoulder. I can take that all the way up into the armpit, and what I realize now is, of course, I'm never just mobilizing a specific muscle. This is why we say we mobilize positions of restriction. So we're thinking about what's going on in the neighborhood as we mobilize these tissues. We don't think about specifically going after and trying to mobilize a specific tissue. I'm thinking, hey, what's going on here? Well, what else is in the neighborhood? Subscap, lats, starting to capture this posterior shoulder a little bit here. But really thinking about this chest wall and the input into this chest wall will go a long ways towards improving your rotation capacity of the shoulder, your elevation capacity of the shoulder, and your degrees of freedom. Most of us spend all night sleeping on our shoulders unless you're a vampire. you know who you are, and you just sleep in an upside down position. But the idea is, man, get into that chest wall. That was last week. This week, let's get onto the side of the chest in these kind of key specific positions, and let's restore your shoulder function. We'll see you next week.